Fire Dancer actually has a little bit more kind of fun going on with the song thanks to the lead guitars. So, starting off, it's basically just it's a typical kind of thing. You got a mid-tempo kind of song, you got a fair bit of gain in there. But then further into the intro, you actually get this kind of lead, like kind of interlude thing that plays. It's not like a lead solo. It's not anything overly flashy. It's just this really catchy kind of lead guitar thing that just keeps kind of playing through this little part of the intro. And it even persists into the first verse. So when the vocalist kind of comes in, everything is all this kind of high energy and it's got this kind of funness to it. It's not like got any kind of dark elements to it. It's not brooding. It's kind of a little bit more kind of bright because of this kind of leads that persist through the song, just giving it this more kind of richness and more kind of fun to it because the lead just sounds interesting. Unfortunately, the song kind of loses it when it kind of gets into the kind of pre-chorus kind of section, because the lead kind of starts cutting out and the rhythm kind of goes a bit kind of more mid-tempo instead of having all this kind of heightened elements to it. So because of that, the pre-chorus seems to kind of like slow it down and all the kind of interesting leads disappear and this kind of fun nature and bounciness that the song kind of has just drops completely. The chorus itself, again, doesn't really have any lead going on, but because it's the chorus, the pacing kind of gets a little kind of quicker a little bit and things get a little bit more energetic. So it kind of brings it back, but it doesn't really kind of live up to what the actual verse is this time, as for usually the chorus is the more kind of bombastic kind of fun element, but actually it's the verse that has the really catchy and memorable riffs and stuff going on. It's just the more interesting, memorable thing because it's a lot more musical, and that makes it easier and a lot easier to just recognise. It's more recognisable. It's a lot easier to remember. Coming out of that chorus, the lead does come back a little, and then it kind of goes into a melody kind of thing. So everything kind of calms down, everything goes kind of clean, which makes you think this verse is kind of going to be clean this time, and actually no, it isn't. It's a little kind of cop-out here, because when the verse actually does kick in, it just goes back to the first verse again, which people may be unhappy about because they just regurgitated, but I kind of like the fact that it did the lead, then it went melodic, thinking, oh, we're going to get a melodic verse, but no, it actually kind of copped out and went back to the kind of verse, which I don't mind because the verse is basically the best part of this track. So that kind of just persists, goes back into your chorus, and then the kind of bridge section where you get the kind of solo stuff and everything going. You don't really get a solo in the song. What you get in the bridge section is this kind of like extremely Latin style play from the musicians. It sounds very Latin. The vocals are just ba da ba 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 da ba da ba ba. So it's kind of going out of the metal genre, and it's kind of fusing in a different genre, which I really like. All the kind of multi-fusions of all sorts of genres combined together, so you don't just listen to the plain typical metal. You got metal infused with like blues elements or like country, and then you got you know, the Latin stuff, like folk stuff as well. I always like it when metal just uses so many things together, so you just have this amazing masterpiece that is just music on show. So I do kind of like that element where everything goes quite Latin kind of style and quite bright, because everything's on like a clean channel. You don't really get gain with Latin stuff. So I do quite appreciate that, and then it kind of just goes back into the chorus, and then it goes into that lead again that was persistent in the intro. And then it ends on piano, which is played in an old school type of way. So by that I mean there is an effect that's being placed in there, which kind of makes the piano sound like it's come out of somewhere like the 30s or something. So very, very old school, and that is basically the Fire Dancer. So let's get into the next track, Cancun. So this track, we've got another kind of mix of genres, as this is pretty much all acoustic based. You also have saxophone quite frequently through the song. So the saxophone kind of brings this quite kind of like jazz element into it, and then the kind of like acoustic element with the kind of, you know, subtle kind of vocals gives it that kind of like calm rock kind of vibe. So it's like a jazzy kind of rock kind of thing that is going on with this song. Something that you could play, you know, just driving alongside a beach and everything with the sun out, and it's just one of them like very happy, relaxed kind of summer songs, which is quite weird from a band like this. And with the first few tracks we've heard, it's a little odd. Because it's just basically this, the song's not overly long, it's basically just 3 minutes 56 seconds. And starting off the intro, you do get the saxophone in there, which is again a great thing because the saxophone isn't really, you know, when you think sax, you think heavy metal. Them two things don't usually go together, so it's good to kind of see that because it's kind of fresh and different and has a uniqueness about it. So you're not going to listen to that and go, oh god, this is something I've heard before, this is bland, this is boring. It's going to be like, no, this is new, I don't know if I'd like it or not because it's a new thing. So it depends on personal preference, but you can't argue that it is very refreshing to have such a thing in here. When the verse comes in, the vocals are a little kind of, well, vocally it's fine, it's lyrically which is the problem, because he's basically singing about going to Cancun and how great it is there, which is, to be fair, a little kind of cheesy. So lyrically it's pretty pathetic and kind of bland, but vocally his performance is perfectly fine. The acoustic calm nature of it is really fine. When the saxophone comes in, it's just very refreshing and gives a great kind of twist to it. The solo in this is actually not by a guitar, the solo is actually a sax solo, which again is just something very new, and you can kind of hear the appreciation of the saxophone, what it's capable of, and just appreciate the capabilities of what the saxophone does, which is very welcome to me. I enjoy hearing instruments pushed to the limit and what they're capable of. Obviously in an environment being metal, which is what I'm used to. If it was a saxophone solo that was in something like an opera, I know you kind of struggle a little there because I haven't kind of got that foundation of where I like being, which is, you know, the metal part. So because of that, it makes it a lot kind of easier to appreciate this kind of saxophone being portrayed, and hearing a solo from it instead of guitars. It just kind of shows, you know, just great musical talent by the guys and what they're capable of, and just all these areas that metal can just constantly dominate without it being like, this isn't metal, metal can't do this, it doesn't work. Yes, it does, because metal is so varied, and the genre is basically just a showmanship of talent, no matter where from or what it is. So pretty basic track, basically just kind of acoustics and the sax, but it changes the pace of things with the surrounding songs around it, and it's quite relaxing and it's very nice and calm, and the saxophone brings a great element to it. So there's basically a track before the cycle starts, which is called Shades ... So I've skipped that because it is basically just an interlude. It's 50 seconds, so it's not really much to talk about. It's basically just like ambient noise that kind of builds into this track, the cycle. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So like one of the previous tracks, which I started this part of the review off of, the Fire Dancer, which had kind of these leads through the song, but missed them in like the chorus as well as the pre-chorus, which kind of died all that kind of high energy that track kind of had going for it. The cycle actually has a persistent lead through the song. So starting off, the lead isn't really there. You've again got this quite bass driven kind of heavy gain, mid-tempo kind of thing going on, and then you've got your lead that comes in. Unlike the Fire Dancer, which has a bit more of a kind of heightened energy about it, the cycle definitely has, there is energy to it, just because that is what a lead kind of gives a song. but it's a bit darker this time. So the actual verse, there is a lot of very intense kind of leads going on with some very heavy kind of chord chugging. In the rhythmic section, the pre-chorus, things get a little bit lighter with the leads and the rhythms and everything, and the tempo slows a little. And when it comes back to the chorus, the kind of tempo increases again. So you get a lot of kind of tempo changes. So being the verse, you've got the kind of, brutal chugging mid-tempo kind of thing, and then the pre-chorus things kind of slow down and get a little bit more melodic with the leads and the rhythm section, and then the chorus, the tempo quickens to quicker than the previous two. There's a lot of kind of tempo changes, and that's kind of how the song is until you finish the second chorus and you get into that kind of extended kind of bridge section, which is just a massively long kind of musical interlude kind of thing. So it's mostly not a lead solo. There is kind of a one there, which is a key lead solo, but for the most part all it really is just kind of riffs and things being done by like guitars and the kind of keyboards, and they just kind of keep changing it, so they just keep making these really kind of interesting, cool sounding kind of riffs and everything until it gets closer to the end where the key solo kind of comes in. So even though it's a big chunk of song, this with not much going on apart from like all these different kind of riffs, the fact that they kind of constantly throw different riffs and kind of sound effects at you, it does actually keep the interest going, instead of it kind of just being, oh, this is just kind of chords just chugging along for about 2 minutes straight. No, it keeps changing, the tones keep changing, the sounds keep changing, the guitars will take a focal point and then the keys take a focal point, which are two completely different kind of tone points and things. So it does kind of keep the sound interesting and constantly shifting and evolving. And then you do get this kind of like little kind of key solo at the end, so technically it's quite interesting, and it does keep the interest going. It's not got a brilliant solo, so there is a problem with that. But the lead that is persistent through the cycle, there's just such an energy about it, and it's got a very intense kind of sound about it. There's some great tempo changes, the leads throughout just make the song just sound a lot bigger than what it is, and show some great musicality about it. So yeah, for a track it is pretty damn good, just because there is so much lead actually through the song. Even though technically you don't get much of an actual lead solo, the fact that the whole song is a lead in itself kind of makes up for it a little bit. And then the huge about 2 bloody minute section in the middle, again I personally don't find to be a nuisance, because they do keep changing from like guitar key, and then you get the key solo near the end, and there's a lot of tonal shifts and everything, so I personally don't really mind it. So as for a song, I really enjoy it. I really appreciate the leads. It definitely gives a lot more life to the song, a lot more kind of energy and musicality and just lift to it. So let's get on to the next one, The Whispers Never Written. This song is a bit complex. It's 9 minutes 16 seconds and there's a lot in this track, so fuck trying to explain everything, because that's going to be damn near impossible. So I'm basically just going to give you the gist of how much is actually in this song. So beginning, you've got like this Latin, Indian, Egyptian kind of sound. I don't know what kind of area you would call it, but to me it's one of them. So that's like the kind of theme that it has, and then it goes very kind of bass gain kind of heavy. It's not, brutal heavy like they're really pounding out things and everything. It's got this very slow pace to it, but everything is very fat in sound. You got saxophones back in there. There is some lead parts that keep coming in and out. There's a lot of pinched harmonics in here. You've got an acoustic classic part. Then you've got your saxophone part. As I said, there's like that Egyptian whatever thing at the start. There's a part where it sounds kind of Mexican or Italian. Then you've got your jazzy elements, the acoustic part, piano. There's one part in the song where it does that kind of like Alton Tower theme, which is that theme park that is in the UK. So it has this theme song that is so there's a small section in this song which is, I think it's in the 5-minute area where they do it for just a few seconds, that theme, which I think it's a little kind of cool. I don't know if they can exactly get away with it, because I don't know if it's like a copyrighted thing, and even doing it for a few seconds, I don't know if they're allowed to. I don't think Alton Towers even own the theme either. It comes from somewhere else. I don't know where though. So yes, the song starts off with that kind of Egyptian-y, kind of Indian kind of vibe, and it goes a very slow, bass-heavy tempo. You get a few leads in there with a lot of them pinched harmonics. And then the song goes into that kind of Alton Tower kind of thing and everything. And then you get your Mexican kind of Italian style of stuff, and then it goes into some very heavy stuff. So instead of the bass heavy slow tempo, it kind of turns the gain up so it's a bit more guitar orientated than bass. And it gets, you know, that little bit heavier, and then it goes into your acoustic area, and then it goes somewhere else near the end. So there's a damn lot going on in this song. So many things with all these different kind of area places like Egypt, Mexican, Italian, fuck knows. And then you've got your Alton Tower theme, well, in the UK for me at least. You've got your acoustic stuff, you've got your jazzy kind of saxophone stuff, you've got your bass heavy stuff, you've got your heavy elements, you've got your acoustic elements with melody, you've got your key elements, sax, and so many things in this song. And it all blends very well together, obviously, and it all works. So this song is a lot to take in. It's 9 minutes 16, that's a lot of song, and the fact that there is so many things going on, and there's a fair few instruments going on, and things shift not just twice, like two songs just glued together back to back. There are a massive amount of shifts in styles, genres, instruments. There is so many things going on that it'll take a fair few fucking listens to kind of remember what the hell this song's doing. And I don't even know if you ever will get used to what actually happens. You may be able to just remember the odd thing, but not be able to remember it the whole way through, to remember this entire track completely. It will take a download of listens. There's so much to it. But again, it's such an intense song with so much going on. Some people may find it a bit bloated. Personally, I don't really find that. I kind of find that my enjoyment persists the whole way through, but I can understand a few people will say it's too bloated, there's too much going on, it's a little messy. Personally, for me, I don't think that. I think everything blends together well. They give each section its little time, and then when things kind of like come in and out for just like the odd second, it's fused well with what comes before and after, so it's not like this jarring thing where it kind of goes, okay, this is now death metal, but now we're doing Kylie Minogue for 2 seconds in there, then we go back, and then we're going a few seconds after that to some folk music, and then a few seconds after that we're going into country, and then a few seconds after that. So that sounds a little messy. This song, it does not do that at all. You get some pretty decent chunks of elements, and then some other elements there is a few seconds where it's blended in with things where the fusion is very kind of organic. But they do give big chunk sections from time to time, so it's not just constant shifting in tones and genres, because that will be a fucking lot to deal with. So yeah, it's a song that is jam-packed full of things going on, and all these genres and instruments and tonal shifts and sounds. if you want a lot in your track and for things to not be repetitive, well then, fucking here you go. This is not repetitive. It constantly shifts and changes all the time. So let's get into the last track here, The Man Made of Stone. Okay, so the last track is 12 minutes 24 seconds, so pretty long, this track, The Man Made of Stone. To get this into context, the singer only comes in at about 2 minutes 25 seconds. Around about there. I haven't exactly been looking and judged it properly, but it's definitely after the 2 minute mark. And the middle section of this song actually goes for a long period of time with no vocals in the slightest. Actually, the majority of the song is mostly instrumental based and quite scarce on vocals. The instruments take the centre stage for this track. And technically, if you listen without really giving it much attention, you probably won't even notice, because the instrumental sections, you don't really notice that they go on for ages and it's like, oh dear Christ, when the hell's the singer gonna come back? You don't really think like that. So it's actually weird that when I've actually looked at this, I had to kind of say to myself, geez, that's when the hell the singer actually starts, because I never really noticed that. I kind of thought it was the typical kind of intro, you get about a minute and then the vocalist will come in. So starting off, everything's kind of calm, and what you actually get is a lead in this intro, which is a very slow lead. It's really slow, it takes its time. He works on making each individual note kind of stand for itself instead of throwing a bazillion notes out there just to kind of show, wow, look at me, I'm fast. It's so slow that every note has to kind of count, because a note will linger for a fair few seconds, therefore you are clearly going to notice it and be able to pick up on it. He can't drown it out with a follow note. So because of this, it is a very well crafted, well kind of thought and structured lead, because it's got to be, because there's nowhere to hide. Therefore you get something very melodic and very slow and very nice and pleasing to the ears, because it has had to be thought about and well constructed. So that goes for a fair while, and then somewhere nearing the 2 minute marker, things get a bit more kind of bombastic and heavier, and then you get into your actual verse where the vocalist comes in. And everything's your mid-tempo, the typical kind of heavy bass, kind of high gain kind of thing. The production quality of this album being not the greatest kind of makes the bass a little bit thicker than I think what they were probably going for, because things aren't as sharply detailed as I would appreciate for the album. The chorus, you've got kind of like a layered kind of vocals. So when the lead singer kind of sings, his voice is kind of layered, so there's multiple versions of his voice in this kind of high register to kind of pull off the sound that he's going for. You get a few kind of leads sprinkled throughout the kind of chorus and verse, but then when you get to after that second chorus and you get that massive interlude part, you get things like flutes that have been a little persistent through the song still. So you get flutes, you get your piano kind of things, some kind of digital stuff. There's a little kind of orchestral kind of sounds in there, but I don't think they're organic, which is why it's kind of hard to kind of say, because it sounds very digitally. So it's hard to kind of say if it is supposed to be an orchestral sound or something else, because it's a little odd. So yeah, I think there's supposed to be an orchestral kind of element in there. There's definitely flutes in here, and like digital effects and piano stuff. There is 2 actual real solos in here, instead of, you know, them usually going for them kind of like, oh, we're going to do a shit ton of really cool sounding riff style things and constantly change between them. So your first solo is actually kind of like the lead at the start of the song. It's very melodic based. So it's not got any flash to it in the slightest. Everything is basically just hitting a note, having it sound out, and then hitting the following note. Or hitting a note and then have it sound out until it fades, and then have a small little break and then come back with the following note. And again, like I said for the start of the song, because of this, the guy has nowhere to hide because each note is sounded out and you will hear it for a fair few seconds. You can't follow it with another note, you can't drown it out, there is nowhere to hide. So each individual note has to work. One note out that doesn't really work and doesn't fit makes the whole thing fall apart. And it's a lengthy kind of solo as well. So as far as the solo actually goes, I think it's perfectly fine. There's elements where he does take a short break and he just takes his time with it. It's very slow, very gradual kind of build, and I really appreciate it. A guy who kind of sits and just lets the notes kind of speak for themselves and takes his time, instead of most metal guitarists where you just get them just shredding all over the place and just blurting anything bloody out. I appreciate it when a guy actually sits down and really appreciates the individual notes, and I can appreciate them for myself and just get something relaxed and melodic which I can enjoy. It's a lot more enjoyable to listen to something very calming and beautiful instead of something where it just goes absolutely bloody ballistic, although I do appreciate them type of things every now and again. And that's how we get on to the second solo, which doesn't follow straight on afterwards. There is a bit more kind of play, some vocals, and then the next solo comes in, which goes for a complete flash, which I really enjoy. I like the fact that I got something that was so calm and sophisticated. And it's not the kind of calm and sophisticated where it's just very slow and calm and then eventually it kind of starts building up. No, it's completely calm. He never starts shredding away. There's no speed to that first solo. Everything is very slow and thought out. As for the second solo, he's got all this high energy and the speed and the intensity, which sounds a lot more like high energy and definitely a lot more energetic because of what it is. But again, I appreciate both. I'm pretty sure most people are probably going to prefer the second solo just because of the energy and kind of skill that is involved over the first solo, which is just basically just having to really think about what you're actually playing to make everything actually sound good and work. Because if, as I said, one note kind of fails and it doesn't really work, it kind of makes everything fall apart around you. As for with Shred, if one note doesn't really work or something, or even if he misplays and it's a bong note, it doesn't matter, because if you play so fast, you can have about 20 notes in a space of a few seconds, and if one note has not been fretted properly, you've got 19 others basically covering it. So it's like near enough impossible to know, especially with all the bass being driven through as well. So again, with the first solo, technically it is probably kind of harder, and there is no room to hide. And you have to think about everything. With Shred, you don't really have to think as much, just as long as you kind of keep things changing and interesting. It doesn't overly matter, to be fair. But again, it's good. You got at the start of the song that had this really nice kind of melodic interlude, and then you had the really nice, well-crafted melodic solo, and then you get the really high-energy, fast, intense solo. So you get the best of two worlds to kind of just show the span of what the guitarist is capable of. So you get the best of the melody and you get the best of the high intensity. And I really appreciate that. I always like both being jammed together instead of I have to pick one and never get any of the other. I like having both, just to show all the creativity, and just I like to basically have the band on full display in front of me. So I really appreciate that. And as the song kind of progresses, it kind of keeps in its like heavy kind of element. There's a few more kind of leads thrown here and there, and that is most of the song. Massive long sections of flute and different changing riffs and everything, and then your melodic solo, your faster solo, some heavy elements, the chorus which has layered vocals, the melodic lead at the intro. So it's kind of a bit more kind of musically orientated, this one, and less of a vocal point. And that is basically the album. So, what do I think of the album? I think it's fantastic, to be honest. Every track offers something so different and unique. There are tracks that have so many fusions of other genres and constant shifting in tone and changes, and a lot of interesting musicality, outside instruments coming in, like the flutes and the saxophone and things. And then spanning genres like acoustic stuff, and then the jazz, the Latin, and goodness knows what, because the only kind of stuff I know is kind of like metal stuff, so I don't know outside genres, but there is a fair few in here. So I just love just all of this showmanship and music incorporated into one album. And the musicians are very gifted, the vocalist is very good. The only problems I really have with the album is pretty much two that I know of at the minute. And that is the second track, Tranquility and Stress, that screaming section. Again, Suspyre's self-titled album spans genres, and there is a lot of different genres infused into this album, and that is basically what the album is. And therefore screaming is another genre being infused into this album. And that's what I like, and it's what I've been praising. So it is a little weird of me and kind of opinionated to kind of say, well, I don't want that genre because it sucks. Because then I'm basically taking away something which the album is supposed to be, you know, pro with, which is all the different kind of genres. So technically that won't be a problem for most. It is basically a personal problem for me because I just despise screamo, and I personally don't think it really fits. There are some bands that do screams where it's like the odd scream I think kind of adds an element, or like getting a mood across of like anger or like intense sadness or something like that, or just like a one-off tone, just to have and think of it like an instrument instead of like a full massive vocal section. But Tranquility and Stress is just like, there's so much musicianship and everything that's gone on, and when a scream kind of comes in, it is so unmusical to me. It just kind of kills everything that the band is, which is musical genius and all these great fusions of music, to something that I don't consider as real music. So that's a personal thing for me. Other people will appreciate it and see it as another genre, obviously. So then the other thing which most will probably agree on is basically the production quality. I don't know if it is actually what the band wants, because there are a lot of bands out there that do like an intense amount of bass that distorts everything. But I just find a few of these tracks are very kind of unclear and precise with what's happening, because everything's been kind of drowned out by the abundance of the kind of bass and the mixing of everything. Again, this could be what they're going for, or it's the fact that it is actually production. But I want to kind of hear the articulation and the guitars and the piano, instead of getting the kind of abundance of kind of bass and all this kind of thick noise. I would like things to be a bit more kind of lighter and articulate. So yeah, they're the only two problems I can really think of. So because of that, and because of all the fusion that's been put into this album, and all the spanning genres and everything, then I'm probably going to be giving this a 9 out of 10. The band are incredibly talented. The vocalist is really, really good. There is only like one track which I mostly like, apart from one section, which is the screaming. And then every other track, there's so many genres and instruments going on, and musicianship and fusions of things. I don't really know what else I could really add to the album or say is bad, beside production, which obviously is the thing to take it out of 10. Just to say production and that little screaming section are the only two things, therefore it's a 6 out of 10, would be a bit ridiculous of me. So I think a 9 is pretty fair, and I don't know what really much more you could really ask for, because there's just so much there. So yeah, Suspyre's self-titled album, a 9 out of 10. The only problem now is this album came out in, I believe I said 2012. So I don't know if the band's not around anymore, which would be a very, very big shame. Because the band had a better production value, and then seeing how they grow and try and outdo themselves from this album, I'd really have liked to have seen that. And to see all these fusions of genres and musicianship going forward, but I don't know. And I don't know if I'll ever know. So I hope one day I can talk about this band again and go on this journey with them. That's what I'm hoping. But until then, 9 out of 10. A really, really fantastic album that I recommend. So until then, I'll see you in the next video.